It's fine.
You don't have a.
He's got a mic on
I know you don't have the one that where I even hold.
out there.
Okay, never
Are you
mind.
gonna sing?
No, it's fine. No, I don't generally. I'll do whatever you want, but I don't generally like standing just behind.
Okay, all right, TV's on. Hey, good afternoon. My name's Dan Hood. I'm the chairman of the Veterans Assistance Committee for CMS. I want to welcome everybody here today. Those that are out there in the audience streaming live with us today, we're going to do something a little different than we have on other programs. We're going to start out with a video. The video is going to last about 8 minutes, and then Rear Admiral Giberson will come up and he'll introduce our speaker, Deputy Chancellor Paul Gregory from the VA. And then at the end of his program, we're going to have a question session for anybody who has questions about how to conduct a memorial benefit. And Joe Dion, our CMS Ethics Director, is here. He's a former JAG. He's also going to take part in the question and answer period. So without further ado, would like to welcome everybody today to the 2018 Memorial Day program. It's titled Paying a Final Tribute. We're going to start with just a moment of silence. If you could please join me. Thank you. We'll start the video now, and then Rear Admiral Giberson will come up and introduce the speaker.
For all who visit, a national cemetery is an awe-inspiring experience, the final resting place for over 3 million American heroes. This is hallowed ground where we honor the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans. The National Cemetery System began when Congress authorized President Lincoln to purchase cemetery grounds for casualties of the Civil War. Since then, veterans from every era and every conflict have been buried in national cemeteries across the country. All honorably discharged veterans are eligible for a burial at no cost to the veteran's family, as well as a burial flag, headstone or marker, and presidential memorial certificate. With that burial comes a commitment to maintain every grave in every cemetery forever as a national shrine. To our veterans and their families, from a grateful nation, this is our sacred trust to you. Dan Murphy's son, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, was killed in action in June 2005. He was a Navy SEAL and the first recipient of the Medal of Honor in the war in Afghanistan.
We wanted Michael buried here because I knew Calverton. My parents are buried here, and I knew the people who operated it, and I knew the care and dedication that they put into it.
A vast majority of the employees here are veterans themselves. They served our country. And they look at it as serving, again, being able to help people at what may be the toughest time of their life.
It's not only a job, but it's a devotion, a way in which to honor those that have sacrificed in defense of this nation. And so I couldn't think of a more fitting place to put my son, a hero, in this cemetery.
Groundskeeper Bill McNaughton is an Army veteran and retired NYPD officer. Each day he visits the grave of his son James, also an NYPD officer, and an Army Reserve Staff Sergeant. James was killed in Iraq in 2005.
I think almost 30 active duty here from Afghanistan and Iraq. To me, all these guys, they're here with people who understand this sacrifice. They all understand. We all understand.
Edgar Marsaw served 19 years in the U.S. Army. He now works at historic Natchez National Cemetery in Mississippi.
Everybody here is like a family to me, and I believe in treating my family well, and everybody's here. We want to make sure that when their loved ones come to visit them, we want them to be comfortable. We want, the overall appearance to be great.
My mom, my parents, my brother, My uncles are all buried in a national cemetery in St. Louis, and I remember how I was treated when I came there with my loved ones, and I try to do the same thing when families come into our cemetery, because we want them to feel that this is home and we're here to take care of them.
One frequent visitor is Albin Burdix, a veteran of the Korean War.
I visit my wife's gravesite traditionally once a week. It's close, easy access for me. It's peaceful, it's quiet. It's a great place to come for solitude and, of course, the memory of my wife.
Visitors to any national cemetery can't help but notice the special care taken of the markers and grounds, part of NCA's commitment to maintain them in perpetuity as national shrines.
It gives me great pleasure personally to know that when I pass on, that I will be interred here with my wife under these most beautiful conditions, without the necessity of family members having to come and to maintain the place or to discuss conditions with the management, knowing full well in my heart today that I will always be treated with dignity as having been a veteran, and that my wife has already had that same pleasure accorded to her. Love you and miss you, sweetie.
NCA understands that the death of a loved one can be one of the most difficult times in life. One way we try to help is by simplifying the process of arranging the funeral.
We make it generally very easy. There's no complicated forms, there's no waiting period, there's no complex eligibility criteria. If you have a copy of your discharge, that's all we need, and we take it from there in a matter of hours.
Furthering our commitment to veterans and their families, NCA has embarked on one of the largest expansion efforts in its storied history.
There are over 400,000 veterans in this area that we will serve with this cemetery. My job as a director and job of the staff is to provide an honorable and dignified burial for the family.
Today, Kim Reka has brought her children to visit the grave of their father, Christopher, a Vietnam veteran who was killed in the line of duty as a police officer in 2007.
There were about 5,000 people that came to the cemetery. And as my younger son, Spencer, referred to, it was a service that was fit for a king. He served his country and his community for most of his adult life. It was wonderful that he was honored. And the cemetery, they did a beautiful job. Everything just went so smoothly. It was beautiful.
I want to make sure that when they arrive here, everything goes according to plan. We treat each and every service as if it was the only one we ever did.
Burial services are provided for both casketed and cremated remains. Many cemeteries also provide interment above ground, in columbaria. Military honors are performed upon request by two-person teams from the Department of Defense. Some cemeteries, like Minnesota's Fort Snelling National Cemetery, use volunteer rifle squads.
During our service, we first of all recognize the entrance of the deceased into the shelter. Right after that, we fire the rifles. Following that, taps, and then the folding of the flag, if it's necessary to fold the flag, and the presentation of the flag to the family.
And they place it in the hands of the widow, and you just kind of clutch it to yourself, you know, because that's the symbol of what they did for this country.
50,940 funerals we have provided service for. Weather has never been a factor. We are out here every day of the week, and that's the way we work.
And they were older veterans themselves doing the shooting, and it was like they almost had a tear in their eye.
Well, yeah,
because they're honoring one of their own, you know.
I say a prayer for all of them here, but it's so peaceful and so beautiful. When I pass, I'll be right here with Wally.
We take care of our own.
The National Cemetery Administration honors veterans with a final resting place that commemorates their service to our nation. All national cemeteries are maintained in perpetuity as national shrines. This service is provided at no cost to veterans and their dependents. For more information, visit our website at www.cem.va.gov. And thank you for your service.
No, thank you. So that was a moving video and a great way to open up our Memorial Day observance. It certainly gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Mr. Paul Gregory is the Deputy Chancellor of the Department of Veterans Affairs Acquisition Academy in Frederick, Maryland. He shares the duties, responsibilities, and authorities of the Chancellor, directs multi-million-dollar acquisition workforce development programs, manages the budget, and leads the day-to-day operations of the Academy. Paul graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1975, and after serving in several operational and staff assignments, retired from the Navy proudly in 1996. He spent time as a program manager in industry and re-entered government service as a team leader with the Marine Corps Systems Command before being selected for the position at the VA Acquisition Academy. We're certainly privileged to have him here with us today and share in our Memorial Day observance. Mr. Gregory.
Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Nice introduction. It's always humbling to speak to the crowd about veterans. That's what we do in the VA. It's even more humbling to me to be introduced by a Rear Admiral, and having served in the Navy for about 26 years. Actually, if you don't mind me starting with a short story, I don't think any of my colleagues here would expect anything less than me to tell a story. But my first week at the Naval Academy, I had as with 1,500 other men back then, no females were in the academy when I went there. So we were late for a meal formation. We were running, and I found out later, very forcefully, that I ran past the 3-star admiral without saluting. Suffice it to say that for the rest of the summer, I saluted all the janitors, I saluted all of the maintenance people. Anybody who had matching trousers and shirts, I was saluting the rest of that summer. So I appreciate the introduction, Admiral. So I wanted to talk a bit about the VA. You probably have heard of us, a little small executive agency. And we'll get into the sizes, but and I also want to recognize that the VA has gotten some bad press recently, and actually in the past couple of years, but 99% of the people in the VA have their heads on straight, and they're going to do what's right for veterans. That's what our mission is, and that's what we strive to do every day. I wanted to go through initially a little overview of the VA, get into the 3 major administrations that we've got, and just give you a briefing on all the veterans benefits that we provide. I learn more every day. I've been with the VA about 4.5 years after spending most of my life in DOD, both in uniform and out of uniform as a civilian. So I'm learning all the time, and I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned so far. Now, our priorities right now, and currently without a secretary, as you may or may not know, but the new secretary has been nominated after our last one left the VA, but we're still working under these priorities. Greater choice for veterans, and what that means is that if a VA service is not available to a veteran, that we're going to pay for them to go out into the community to get the care that they need. You may or may not have heard of the 40-30 rule. The 40-30 rule is if a veteran lives more than 40 miles away from a VA facility, or it takes more than 30 days for them to get the care that they need, that we will pay for them to go and get the care elsewhere out in the community. We're modernizing our systems. I think that all government agencies are probably working on system modernization, but I was astounded as to how old some of our IT systems are, but we're in the process of major upgrades across there. We're focusing our resources more effectively, improving timeliness of service, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then suicide prevention. Veteran suicide is an epidemic in the country. We're currently losing about 20 veterans a day to suicide. 14 of those are not in the VA system, which is another issue that we're trying to get, is to get more veterans into the system. And I'm sure that everybody in here and everybody who's listening knows veterans or are veterans themselves. And if you are eligible, I encourage you to participate in VA care. We've got some of the best suicide prevention programs and helpline programs that you'll see in a little bit. So I wanted to really quickly go through who our customers are, and that's the military services. And you can see the military values and the VA values as we go through this. So the Department of Army, these are their core values. Navy, honor, courage, and commitment, ingrained in my head. Air Force, integrity first, service before self, and excellence. Marine Corps, also part of the Navy Department, as much as they don't like to admit it. They are. Although the Marines that I worked with always said, yeah, we're the men's department. But and then the Coast Guard. And you'll see that in the core values of the VA are very similar to the values of the military services. We came up with the ICARE acronym: integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. And we try to espouse that in all that we do when we serve our veterans. Real quickly, history of VA. This is something that I didn't know, that our last secretary, I was at a meeting with him and he brought it up. It shows that the first home for the VA was in 1866. Actually, the VA traces its roots back to, I think it was 1676, 100 years before our nation's independence, when the Pilgrims voted to support people who were injured in the combat issues back then. So that's where VA actually traces their roots all the way back then. I won't go through everything through this, but you'll see that the first consolidation after World War I was 1921. General Bradley took the reins of the VA and was the first administrator of the VA back when it was the Veterans Administration. In 1959, the motto that we still live by today was from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, where he said that it was to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphans. So that is still our motto at the VA. You'll see that in 1989, we became a cabinet level, so we went from the Veterans Administration to the Department of Veterans Affairs at that point, and we've been a cabinet level agency since then. 2017, Secretary Shulkin was in. 2018, he was out. So we're waiting for the latest nominee is Robert Wilkie, who came over from the Department of Defense. He is up for congressional confirmation, hopefully soon. Just some stats on the VA. This shows 356,000 employees. That's a little old. We're about 370,000 now. We're the second largest federal agency to the Department of Defense. And you can see on the right how we're kind of split up. The big gorilla in the room is always the Veterans Health Administration. They're the bulk of the VA is providing health care to veterans. That's 89% of the VA. We're also the largest employer of veterans worldwide. About a third, roughly a third of our employees are veterans. So it's veterans serving veterans, which has proven to help the care, because as you saw in the video, we understand what veterans need and what veterans have gone through. Now, our projected population is a little over 22 million for the veterans from the military. We do care for about 9 million of that. I've got the exact number in here later on, but so we're missing out on a large population of veterans. We're getting more all the time, and you'll see some more statistics about that. Our workforce is extremely diverse. These are some of the functions that we perform, from lawyers through psychiatrists, doctors, nurses, coaches. We have a gamut of people that are employed by the VA. Okay, how we're organized. We've got the central office where headquarters is downtown in DC. That's a small portion, roughly 1,300 people or so. The Veterans Health Administration, the Veterans Benefit Administration, and the National Cemetery Administration, who produced that first video that you watched. Now, we're also worldwide. We go from Puerto Rico on this side of the world over to the Philippines on the other side of the world. So we've got, in all 50 states, we've got organizations and activities and facilities and across international areas. A couple things that I just wanted to highlight. Most people, and I didn't, I'm one of the most people, didn't know some of the things that the VA brought to healthcare in the country. First of all, and this is forced on necessity from the continuous war that we've been in since 2003, but we're leading the world in research in post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, any spinal injuries, and prosthetics. We're leading the way in developing new prosthetics all the time. The battlefield medicine in the Department of Defense has gone so far that people who would have died on the battlefield before are now living. We have quadruple amputees, actually, who have survived some major explosive blasts in theater. And they obviously need care, and the prosthetics is helping them continue to be productive in society. The third bullet down is the first powered ankle-foot prosthesis. That was really interesting to me that, if somebody has had amputation, whether it's a full leg or half a leg that was amputated, that ankle joint is so critical to mobility that this powered prosthesis really makes a difference in improving mobility and reducing the amount of energy that somebody has to use to walk. One thing that is very interesting is that the VA developed a shingles vaccine that the country takes these days. They also developed the first transdermal nicotine patch to help people from smoking. The other very interesting point is that 70% of the physicians in the country have been trained in the VA, whether it's through internships, job rotations. So the VA is critical to the healthcare system in the country, and 1 out of every 4 nurses come through the VA for clinical rotations. So we have a huge impact on the quality of the healthcare in the country. And the final one is the aspirin a day that I'm sure you've heard and seen, but people who are susceptible to heart or stroke injury, heart attacks or strokes, have been advised to take an aspirin to help thin the blood to prevent that from being a debilitating or fatal injury. That was developed by a VA nurse that came up with that idea. We've got a program that's ongoing. We're about 60% of the way there, called the Million Veteran Program. This is a genomic research project that is taking blood samples from veterans on a voluntary basis, and they are actually doing the genome tracing. They're looking at how it affects health in Parkinson's, PTSD, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. We've had a couple of great success stories. We had one female veteran who volunteered, and she claims that the VA saved her life because we detected through this program that she was very susceptible to uterine cancer. And through that program, she was treated and prevented from getting it, actually. So she's very grateful to the VA. So we've got about 580,000 people that are currently in there. Data is not identifiable to any specific person, but it goes into the whole study that we've got going on, and will become one of the largest medical databases in the world. Some of the other things that we've done, the one that I really was amazed by is the VA employees. We've won 3 Nobel Prizes and 7 Lasker Awards in the VA. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't, the Lasker Award is kind of like an Oscar except for medical research. So we've had some pretty significant impacts by our VA employees. Other technologies that we put the veteran in control of their health, electronic medical system. The telehealth program that we've got going on has been great to keep veterans and some of our Warriors to Workforce program interns that we do at the Acquisition Academy in Frederick. They don't have to leave the academy. They can actually do telehealth appointments with their doctors remotely from the academy. So it keeps them in touch. They don't have to go to a medical center. They could do it straight through the phone and video with their doctor. And you will actually, our previous secretary, Dr. Shulkin, was an active physician. You can see him in his office doing a telework with one of his telehealth, I keep saying telework, but telehealth appointment with one of his patients that he continued to serve while he was the secretary of the VA. So I wanted to go over quickly because if you are not a veteran or have a veteran in your family, I'm sure that you know veterans. I'm leaving behind some couple pieces of information that give you all the resources that you need to contact people in the VA or to apply for benefits, but just an overview of what the benefits are that are available to veterans. I'm going to start with, who you start with is the Veterans Benefit Administration to register for those benefits, Veterans Health Administration, and then we'll finish up with the National Cemetery Administration. So VBA, we've got over 4.5 million veterans currently receiving some type of compensation benefits. The amount of claims has been skyrocketing, and I've got a little graph later that shows that. But 1.3 million compensation pension claims were processed in a year. We've been processing over 1 million claims a year now for, I think, the last 5 years. So the volume of claims from the constant conflicts that we're overseas in and the wounded veterans that are coming back and getting benefits is just amazing. So roughly 50% of all of our VBA representatives are veterans. And the other great benefit that we've got is the GI, well, 2 of them, GI Bill and the Home Loan Guarantee Program. So we prevented 97,000 veterans from being foreclosed on, so they were not put into the homeless category. And homelessness is another big issue that we've been pushing to solve for the past several years. I won't get into all these details, but VBA is run through a network of 56 regional offices and about 22,000 employees. This presentation, if you want to ever refer to it, I think, Dan, you're going to make it available to anybody who needs it. So what does VBA provide? Compensation benefits, both disability and dependency benefits, pension benefits, fiduciary, so it's disability or survivor benefits. There's an insurance program for life insurance and mortgage insurance, the home loan guarantee program I mentioned, the education programs through the GI Bill, and our vocational rehabilitation and employment, which you're actually going to be participating in your cyber track that is being developed here. We do that for our intern program as we use the vocational rehabilitation and employment benefits that are paid by the Veterans Benefit Administration. So we'll go through answers to these 4 questions. What benefits are you eligible for? Are you eligible? How do you apply? And what types of facilities are there? So one thing that the VA has, 2 secretaries ago, Secretary Bob McDonald, who was a West Point graduate from the same class that I was at the Naval Academy. He was the class of 1975, except we beat them in Army. We beat Army in football when I was there, but anyway. One of his big pushes is when he came to the VA back in, I think it was in 14, summer of 14 was when Bob McDonald was confirmed as the secretary. He looked at the vast number of 800 phone numbers and the websites, and we had over 1,800 phone numbers. So the toll-free number, 800 whatever, and it was confusing. You'd call one and they'd say, oh no, call this 800 number, or you'd go through the whole phone tree and find out it was the wrong one. So they put in a big effort to consolidate both the websites and the phone numbers. You can now get any question answered through the National Call Center at that 800 number right in the middle of the screen. And whether it's benefits, whether it's they can get you to the cemetery administration, we've got a crisis line that we'll talk about later too. But the website Explore VA will get you tell you what you're eligible for benefits-wise, or anybody that you know that's a veteran, what they are eligible for benefit-wise after answering a few questions. And there's also a federal guide to benefits that you can download from the website up here. It's a PDF file. How do you file a claim? You can you can do it on the phone, or you can go through the eBenefits website. We've tried to make this as simple and as customer-friendly as we could. In VBA, we've got a bunch of different types of facilities. The big ones for veterans are the regional offices. They're the ones that do most of the processing for benefits, but we've got these other centers too that we won't need to go through all of those. I mentioned the disability compensation workload. In 6 years, it went up 132%. You could see that the push in the transformation of the VA was to improve quality. We've been able to improve the quality despite that huge workload increase from 83% to 90%. And we're getting $31 billion more in the hands of veterans for compensation and pension benefits. That's a 70% increase. Other increases that we've done, 1.6 million since 2009 is what our compensation, pension benefit, and VR&E beneficiaries grew by. So that's, when you consider it, that's more than our active duty components combined. 1.6 million veterans were being served in that period. Now, what has the transformation done? You can see where on this graph where the transformation started, roughly in 2012 or so. We had some increases through there, but then VBA has improved their systems, their processing ability. They're doing a lot of this electronically instead of paper copies now. I think I saw one statistic that it was the level of paper that the VBA was processing was equivalent to 3 Mount Everests in size, so huge amount of paper. They've gone to mostly electronic processing now, so it's improving the quality and it's improving the processing speed. So you can see that at a peak, we had a 611,000 claim backlog That has gotten down now through the dedicated efforts of the Veterans Benefit Administration to under 100,000, and they're still working to improve that, get that down to zero. So that was a huge complaint amongst veterans, is that it took years to get the benefits done. If you're a veteran and you went through that, we've cracked that nut, I think, and we're processing claims much faster. So that's the Veterans Benefit Administration. The big gorilla, as I mentioned, is Veterans Health Administration, nearly 90% of the VA. This is a picture of the Lebanon VA Medical Center in Pennsylvania. And rightfully so, we got some bad publicity from what happened back in 2013, I guess that was, or 2014. It was when our General Shinseki, our secretary back then, that he established some wait time requirements that he wanted veterans to get an appointment within 14 days. He had his, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but he had the right idea, quicker service to veterans. It was just a metric, and you have to be, and I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so I understand metrics and units of measure, but it was a great metric to strive for, but it allowed people to game the system a little bit, and that's what happened in the bad press that we got with separate waiting lists being kept in order for people to meet the metric. That's one thing that we teach, and Deb Gadsden, who is right here in the front row, when she was in the program management school at the VA Acquisition Academy, we taught how to develop metrics so that it was not so easy to game the system. So that's one caution when you develop metrics. But since then, we've taken a huge effort with scheduling systems, making them electronic. That right now, 96% of all appointments are completed within 30 days, and 90% of the met the 14-day mark. So that's a huge difference. I've seen it with my mother-in-law getting care out in the regular industry, and regular industry doesn't meet those kind of days in the healthcare industry that I've seen. In 2016, they completed 58 million appointments, which is more than 1.5 million than that was done the previous year. So again, another huge increase in what the service that we're providing. One of the things that Secretary McDonald and Secretary Shulkin stressed is that they wanted to get to same-day services. We've done that in all of our major medical centers now, that same-day services for mental health and for primary care are available at every VA medical center around the country. And finally, the measures of quality care in the upper right, when you're looking at that we perform better than the private sector in 96 of the outpatient measures for quality care. So very proud of that. And very proud of the transformation that's been going on in the VA for the past few years. Still got a lot of work to do, but we're moving in the right area. Whole health, so that the VA is going to a whole health where they've got a team that supports the veteran across their entire spectrum of treatment options. So we've got mental health, we're using things such as, skipping my mind, the little needles they stick in you, acupuncture. My mind dropped sync there for a second, but so acupuncture is being used in the VA. They're using yoga, meditation, things like that. So they're treating the whole body to improve the health of veterans. I won't go through all the services, but these are services that are provided by the VA, including chaplain support, the integrative health that I just talked about. The one big bullet, you all know that we've got an opioid crisis, opioid addiction crisis in the country right now. Through our complementary and integrative health within the veteran community, we've had a 22% reduction in opioid use since 2010. So I think that's a great accomplishment, I think, as we go forward, that we're concentrating on. Veterans Choice Program, I mentioned this briefly up front. This is to give veterans the ability to seek care outside of the VA system if the VA is not able to provide the care in the time frame or within the radius of 40 miles to a veteran's home. President Trump signed that in April of 17, that extended that Veterans Choice Act, and we're working to put some more improvements in that now with Congress. But under the Veterans Choice Program, we created more than 3 million authorizations, and we've got a network of 500,000 healthcare providers across the country that participate in this program. Here's 4 questions on VHA that we'll go through in a couple of slides. Big one is, how do you find a VHA facility? Well, there's a website for that. That's the typical answer, right? But our va.gov website has an interactive map that'll show you where all the VA locations, we've got more than 1,700 locations. They're not all major medical centers, but they're the small clinics. They're called community-based outpatient clinics. So they're across the country. You can also call this 877 VHA helpline number that's up there to find a facility or a VHA resource. Ways that you can apply: you can call the vets.gov help desk, you can do it online, you can mail in an application, or you can go into an office and apply in person. So we're trying to make it as easy as we can for veterans to get the care that they need. We also kicked off myhealthva.gov that gives the veterans access to their own health care information. Their medical information is stored in there. They can access it when they need to, and then it's all available with a few clicks of a button. Types of VHA facilities I had mentioned, the clinics. We've got our major medical centers, 163 now. And Fisher houses are, if you haven't heard of a Fisher house, those were built, they were not built by the VA, but they complement VA medical facilities. When my father passed away, he was a World War II veteran. We took donations in his honor to the Fisher House that was being built in Milwaukee. And what the Fisher House does is they provide living quarters for family members of veterans that are inpatients at a VA medical facility. So the Fisher House is a great, saves a lot of money for the families, takes the stress out of having somebody as an inpatient in a medical center. Veteran Center is another one of the VHA facilities. It helps in readjustment counseling for veterans as they transition out of the military. You can see that eligibility is you served in a combat zone and received a military campaign ribbon, or you are a victim of military sexual trauma. So there are a lot of counseling services. They work with VHA facilities in order to get medical care for those veterans. They give you employee assistance referrals. And again, the contact number is on the slide. So I wanted to wrap it up as a Memorial Day celebration here. The thing that makes Memorial Day such a special holiday is that it is in honor of those men and women who died in service of the country. We won't get, even though I'm in education and training, we won't get into a history lesson, but it did start back in I think it was 1866, after the Civil War, when it was originally called Decoration Day. But the National Cemetery Administration is a world-class organization that provides memorial benefits to veterans. You saw the video up front. But currently, the NCA maintains 3.5 million grave sites around the country. In 2016, more than 345,000 veterans and their loved ones had received memorial benefits. And I'll give you some specifics about who is honored with memorial benefits by the NCA. Most of the NCA employees are veterans, 75%. The interesting thing is NCA has topped the Consumer Satisfaction Index across the country, which is for any service that's provided, whether it's government or industry. But they've topped that and been number one 6 consecutive years. So NCA does a great job. Couple pictures of some of the national cemeteries across the country in Bakersfield, Springfield, Illinois. So what does NCA provide? Their services, obviously, they provide burial spaces for veterans and any eligible family members. We've got 135 national cemeteries and 33 soldiers' lots in 40 different states and Puerto Rico. They open and close the graves, provide perpetual care of the graves. They provide the headstones, markers, and bronze medallions that indicate the service that the veteran served in. The burial flag is provided to the surviving members of the family. They provide a presidential memorial certificate, and they also provide construction grants for state and tribal cemeteries for use for veterans. All of these are provided at no cost to the family. So we'll talk about these 3 things. What burial benefits are available, who's eligible, and how do you arrange for it. The arrangements are very, very simple, as you'll see. So first off, Explore VA is the website that will tell you who is eligible for benefits, memorial benefits. There's also a pre-need burial eligibility determination program, so there's a VA form for it that you can get that filled out, turned into the VA through the National Cemetery Scheduling Office. Now, I've been told recently that because of the extremely large volume of forms that they're getting, I think that there's currently a temporary hold on that processing because they're also very active in scheduling burials at national cemeteries and with funeral homes around the country. But you can get that into the queue, or you can visit that exploreva.gov website to find out what eligibility there is for NCA benefits. I have to wrap this up quickly. Arranging for a burial. VA's website, the NCA's website is the cem.va.gov. There's an online daily burial schedule that they've got that provides a nationwide burial schedule showing what cemetery and who is being buried. That's a new service that has been provided, so anybody can find out what's going on nationwide in a VA cemetery. Arranging for a burial. The only thing you really need is a DD-214, which is your discharge certificate from the military. If you've got a DD-214 or you've got a DD-214 for a family member that has passed away and you wish to take advantage of the memorial benefits provided by NCA, that's what you need. And they will schedule, you'll see in a second, I went too far, that typically within 2 hours, most of the burials are scheduled once they get the information that they need. So I wanted to go a little deeper into burial benefits. So we've got 135 national cemeteries. I talked about what is provided at no cost. Also, if a cremation is preferred by the family or the veteran, the national cemeteries have the columbariums that they can also have the veteran inurned there or at a private cemetery. However, the actual cremation is not paid for by the VA. That's a family expense. But the inurnment in a VA columbarium or any of the other benefits, including the burial flags, are available. Headstones, markers, and medallions. It's something that I learned that actually took advantage of, and they did it after my father passed away, but the medallions are pretty nice. They're a little service medallion that can be put right onto a headstone. I got it after my father passed away. Once I found out it was available, it shows the branch of service that he served in is put on the actual marker, whatever type of marker that is in that cemetery. The VA will provide the headstone, especially obviously for the national cemeteries, but in a private cemetery they will also provide the headstone, but it has to be of the type that that cemetery requires. But they will provide whether it's granite, marble, bronze, upright headstones, or the I guess just kind of like a plaque, like my father's got it, that's set into the ground. The VA, the cemetery staff sets all of those headstones, opens and closes the graves at no cost at all to the family. Presidential Memorial Certificates. This is a certificate that is signed by the current president. It started back under John Kennedy and has been continued since then by every president. The VA will take care of that should the family desire to have a Presidential Memorial Certificate presented. Funeral honors. DOD does all of the military funeral honors. I know that, and my father's buried in a private cemetery, but working with the funeral home and the VA, the funeral home actually schedules it. They work with the local veteran service organization to provide the honor guard. But public law does require that every eligible veteran receive military funeral honors. The VA provides burial flags. We've got a nationwide distribution. They typically will show up within 2 days of being notified that we've got a memorandum of understanding, and we fund the Postal Service. They've got distribution centers around the country, so burial flags are provided very quickly. As long as it was better than a dishonorable discharge, anybody who served in the armed forces gets to the honor of having a burial flag that is provided to the next of kin. And I just want to provide this. This is what other services are available. There's the one other number is the MyVA 311. It's 844 MyVA 311. That is provide you any information you need on the VA. Veterans Crisis Line. Well, I skipped ahead. This one is a new website, vets.gov. This one is a single point of entry into VA services for any veteran, access through vets.gov. MyVA 311, as I was talking about, that is also similar to the vets.gov website, where it's a phone number, and you'll have to suffer through a phone tree, but you'll get to what you need to know. You get any information on disability, pension, health care. All of the eligibility and enrollment can be done through the phone. The other thing that this was under Secretary McDonald, the community engagement model. It's called the Veterans Experience. We've got Veterans Experience officers around the country, and we've got 5 major areas. I think New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, and I guess DC is the fifth one. But they work closely with all the Veteran Services Organization, getting input on how the VA can improve, how we can get better. And it gives veterans, family members, a voice directly into the VA. Homeless veterans, that was a big issue around the country, that we've got a large number of homeless veterans. That was a concentrated effort that started under Secretary Shinseki that continued through Secretary McDonald. We were able to cut it by half. So we ended, actually in the state of Virginia, working with the Virginia State of Veterans Affairs. They've got, they eliminated veteran homelessness in that state, the first state to have done it. We had an interesting, well, it's getting late for a little story, so I'll skip that one. This is an important one. Veteran suicide it's a crisis here in the country. If you know of any veteran who is in a crisis, there's a toll-free number to call, 800-273-8255. They will get in touch with a live person. It's no phone tree. We recognize that if somebody is calling that number, they're in a state of crisis, whether they're on the verge of committing suicide or they're entertaining thoughts of suicide. This helpline has saved thousands of veterans so far, and we hope that it will continue until we solve the problem of veteran suicide. But over 86,000 referrals to local medical center suicide prevention coordinators. So we were able to interview. We opened up a new one in a new hub in Atlanta. We've got 2 hubs that allow us to answer these phones instead of making people go through a whole phone tree. They'll get directly in touch with somebody. They call that number and press 1. You will be in touch with the crisis coordinator. That's a little bit more we talked about already. Secretary Shulkin's goal was to get to 0 on veteran suicide. We've got a long ways to go. Other services outside of the VA, Arlington National Cemetery, most people don't realize that is not run by the VA, that is a Department of the Army cemetery. And, okay, veteran service organizations, they're very helpful in making sure that they can guide a veteran to get the benefits, to interface with the VA, help them through it. Recognize their chartered VSOs are some of the ones that are up there. The Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, Order of the Purple Heart. And then there are several other ones that are non-recognized, but they all work closely with the VA. And there also may be state benefits. So there's a National Association State Directors of Veterans Affairs that we work with all the time. And veterans are our customers, along with their dependents. And we actually serve service members while they're still on active duty. So that's the end of mine. I know that we had some questions, time for questions, should anybody have any, and I know you...
We've got like 2 minutes left, and first of all, I want to thank you
you're
for
welcome.
coming to speak to everybody today. But I'm going to ask Joe, you got a couple of minutes if you got a couple things you want to squeeze in here, and then I'll dismiss the program.
In 2 minutes. Thank you, Dan. No, that's okay. Yeah, just very quickly, the legal assistance that's available to our military personnel. First of all, the best way to actually address this is to contact your local legal assistance office at your closest military base. The legal assistance is available to retired personnel and to their legal dependents. However, oftentimes legal assistance offices will actually extend those services to veterans in general. The best way to find out, though, is simply call the local office and find that out. Precedence is always given to those who are on active duty, but you'd be surprised, many of them actually do extend legal assistance to veterans as a general rule. They can assist you with a number of different types of legal issues. I would say as a general rule, depending on the specialization of the attorneys at that legal office, it depends on and what's going to be available. But as a general rule, you can get assistance with wills, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, contract negotiation, lease agreements, divorce and separation, notarization. They're required to have a notary at every office. I believe that's still required, although it's been a few years since I was active duty. And then also with medical claims, there's a medical claim process can be pretty difficult, so it's a good idea to request assistance with that if you have any questions. Okay, we're at the time, so we can open it up for questions at this time, both to myself or to Mr. Gregory. Yeah, if you could, speak through the microphone.
Thanks for coming, sir. Quick question on the cemetery. Do you recommend or can you reserve a national cemetery plot beforehand, or do you have to wait until something or close to your death? I was wondering about that. I know in civilian cemeteries you can reserve. So I have a local one in my county where I grew up. It's a beautiful cemetery, opened up like 4 years ago, and I want to plot there. I was wondering if you knew anything about that. Thanks.
And your question is, can you reserve
Can you reserve a slot or a plot on a veteran cemetery prior? Or do you have to wait until, the thing ends? You know what I mean?
No, I don't believe you can reserve a plot. You can do that predetermination form so that you're in the system, but I don't think that you could reserve a plot, no.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Sorry for running over.
That's okay. This is this will be the end of our Memorial Day program for today. I wish everybody a happy Memorial Day, safe holiday, and please take time to pay a final tribute and remember why we have the holiday. Thank you to our speakers, and thanks to everybody for coming today. Thank you.
As quick as I can close it.